Hello, everyone. Today is Friday, March 21st, 2025, and you're here with Robin and Scooby at In the Family Way Coaching. We're here for our daily Bible reading. We are reading through the entire Bible in 1 year. And what Bible are we using? That's right, the Day by Day Kids Bible. And it's been written by who? That's right, Karen Henley. I want to make sure that we give proper credit to Karen Henley every single day that we read her book. She has done such a magnificent job on this Bible. If you are just finding me and this event, then let me tell you that this version of the Bible is awesome. Don't be discouraged by the fact that it says that it's a kid's Bible, because this is simply a condensed version, what somebody said to me, like a Reader's Digest version, if there's anybody here old enough to know what that means. So it's like a condensed story, but this is done in chronological order. So we have the full story from the beginning to the end, Genesis to Revelation, in order, and nothing is repeated. If you've tried to read the Bible or you've read parts of the Bible before, you may have noticed that some events are recorded in more than one book. And so when you read about them across the different books, it can be confusing as to what happened when. This simplifies that. So we see one continuous story, and that way we are not confused because it's very important that when we read the Bible, we understand it. That's a big goal for this event, not just to read it, but to understand it and to see how God has application in our very lives every single day with what we read. Our goal is to see ourselves in the people that we read about because they are everyday people. It doesn't matter that we're reading about King David. He's still just a regular person like you and like me. And our goal is to see ourselves in the actions of what happens so that we can learn what to do and sometimes what not to do, so that we can be encouraged and see how God takes care of people, including us, every day when we come to these situations. So thank you for joining me today. If you have been around a little while, you may have a calendar. It's time to get that out because we're about to read the Bible today. I have my calendar out and I have my sticker on there. If you are interested in keeping track of your daily commitment and your daily achievement to read the Bible with me each day this year, or even just by month, then please feel free to head over to my site at www.inthefamilywaycoaching.com and click on the tab for Read the Bible in 1 year. I have a free downloadable calendar for you to download. I also have participation gifts to give to people who are participating in this event, and I would love to send one to you, but I would need your information and your name. So when you go to that site and you click on the tab for Read the Bible in 1 year, you will find that there are sub-tabs. So you will have March 2025 readings as well as March 2025 audio readings. If you click on either one of those, there is a purple box that says leave me a message letting me know you read or listened today. And then if you send me that message, send me your information, and I will be happy to send you a participation gift. You don't need to pay for this. This is not something that is available to people who are subscribing to my live event or people who are choosing to support the event. This is something that I am just led to give away to you. It's a little bit of a motivation, but it's also my thank you for joining us here this month. If you would like to support the event and you do feel led to support the event, I do have an option for that on my site as well, and that's under the heading of Part of the Family. We are all part of the family. You are part of my family in the body of Christ, and you are all my brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter how young or old we are. We are all part of the same body of Christ, and we are all brothers and sisters. So thank you very much for joining me today, whether you are, oh, there goes my phone. Whether you are following along on TikTok or watching on my site, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Podbean, Podfriend, Overcast, Castoff, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. I'm also on Pandora. Wherever you are following along, I am so glad you are here today. Thank you for following along with this event. We are reading about King David, and yesterday we saw that Absalom came to his death and that King David is mourning, which means to be very sad when somebody dies, the loss of his son. And today we're going to pick up there, and our reading will take us through 2 Samuel chapters 19 and 20, as well as 2 Samuel chapter 24 and 1 Chronicles 21. If you are hungry for more of God's Word and feel that there could be a little more detail in what we are reading or hearing about today, please feel free and welcome and encouraged to head up your big Bible, and those are the chapters that we will be reading. I always list these chapters as well as a description of what we are reading in our daily application in the description for today's reading. So if you ever miss that and you want to go back and reference that, you don't have to listen again. It's always right there in the description. So picking up today, our first section is entitled, King David Goes Back Home. Someone told Joab, King David is crying for Absalom. The army had been glad they won. Then they heard that King David was crying for Absalom. So they became sad. The army went into the town quietly. They were like men who felt bad because they had lost. King David kept crying, My son, Absalom! Absalom, my son! My son! Joab went to see King David. You have made your whole army feel bad, said Joab. We just saved your life today. We just saved your family. But it looks like we're not important to you. It looks like you wish Absalom was alive and we were dead. Now go out and see your men. Cheer them up. If you don't, then they won't fight for you again. And that will be the biggest problem you have ever had. So King David got up, he went out, and he sat at the gate of the city. The men heard that David was sitting at the gate, so they all went to go see him there. And while this was going on, the people who had followed Absalom began fussing. King David saved us from our enemies, they said, but he's left the country, and it's all because of Absalom. We chose Absalom to be our king, but now he is dead. Shouldn't we ask King David to come back? Then David sent a message to the priests. Tell the leaders that I've heard what the people are saying. Will you be the last ones to bring me back? Everybody wanted David to be king again, so they sent him a message. Come back. Bring all your men with you. So King David headed back. He got to the Jordan River, and some men from Judah had come to the river. The servant from Saul's family was with them. They hurried to help the king's family across the river. A man came across the river to the king. He had thrown rocks at David before, but now he bowed down with his face to the ground. Please don't be angry with me, he said. Forget the bad things I said when you left. I know I sinned. Please don't be angry with me. Today I am coming to be the first to meet you. We should kill this man, said Joab's brother. He said bad things about you. You don't think like I do, said David. Should we kill people today? I know I'm king today. Then David promised the man who had thrown rocks, You won't die. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, came to meet King David too. He hadn't washed his feet or his clothes since David had left Jerusalem, and he hadn't trimmed his hair. Why didn't you come with me? Asked King David. I was going to go with you, said Mephibosheth. You know I can't walk, so I was going to ride my donkey. But my servant tricked me. He lied to you about me. But you are like God's angel to me. So do what you think is best. I was from Saul's family. I should have died, but instead, you let me eat at your table. So I have no right to ask you for anything. That's all I need to know, said David. I'll let you have half of the land. Your servant will have the other half. An old man came out to see King David too. The man was 80 years old. He and his friends had brought food to the king before. "Come across the river with me," said King David. "Live in Jerusalem with me, and I'll take care of you." "I won't live many more years," said the old man. "I can't tell you what's good and bad. I can't even taste what I eat and drink. I can't hear very well, and I'd just be in your way. I'll go back home, and that way I can die in my own town. But look, here is my son, and he could go with you." "Then your son will go with me," said King David. "I'll do whatever you like for me to do." So everybody crossed the Jordan River. King David hugged the old man, and he prayed for God to send him good things. Then the man went back home. Now there was a man named Sheba who liked to cause trouble. He called out, "We don't follow David. Everybody go back to your own homes." So many people left King David to follow Sheba, but the people from Judah followed King David. This next section is entitled, "The Angel at the Barn." 2 Samuel 24 and 1 Chronicles 21. Satan came against God's people, and he tried to make David do wrong. Satan tried to get David to count the men in the army. So David called Joab and the other army leaders. "Count the number of men in the army," he said. "I want to know who fights for us." "I hope God gives you lots of men," said Joab. "All the men in the land will fight for you. Why do you need to list them? It's wrong." But King David was the boss, so Joab and the leaders listed the men. It took them 9 months and 20 days. They counted 1,100,000 men. But Joab didn't count the men from Levi or Benjamin. He didn't think it was right. Now King David's order to count the people was wrong to God. "I have sinned," said David. "Please take my sin away." David's prophet was named Gad. God told Gad, "Go to David. Tell him I'm letting him choose one of these 3 things. He can have no food grow for 3 years. He can have his enemies win for 3 months. Or he can have 3 days of a terrible sickness through the whole land. You choose which one you want." "I'm very upset," David said to Gad. "Let God send the sickness. God is loving and kind. Let him be in control, but don't let the enemy be in control." So God sent sickness, and 70,000 people died. Now God's angel was on the way to Jerusalem, but God was very sad at what was happening, and he told the angel, "Stop! That's enough." The angel was standing at a farmer's workplace. David looked up, and he saw the angel. The angel was between earth and heaven. His sword was out. It was pointing to Jerusalem. So David went toward the workplace. The farmer was not working. His 4 sons were with him. He turned around, and he and his sons saw the angel too. His sons went to hide. Then David walked up, and the farmer bowed down with his face to the ground. David said, "Sell me your workplace. I want to build an altar to God here, and then he will stop the sickness." "Oh, take my barn for free," said the farmer. "Do whatever you want with it. I'll even give you the oxen to offer as a gift to God. I'll give you the wood. I'll also give you wheat to offer to God as a gift." "No," said King David, "I will pay you for it. I won't take something that's yours and give it to God. I won't give God something that cost me nothing." So King David paid 15 pounds of gold, and he bought the farmer's workplace. He built an altar there and offered gifts to God. Then God stopped the sickness. And that's the end of our reading today. Well, the first thing we want to notice is that David was once again showing compassion and forgiveness toward the people who had spoken badly of him. And this is so recurring in our readings that we see forgiveness and compassion from David. We see forgiveness from God, and that is supposed to be our example. And David knew forgiveness from God, and he was being also forgiving and kind to the people who had said bad things about him. The man who had thrown rocks at him and said bad things about him, when that was going on, you may remember that David said, "No, don't kill him or stop him. What if God has told him to say this?" So he was submitting to whatever his fate was going to be. And here we see that he forgave him. So we know that that is a very frequent daily application for us. Even when people have done mean things to us, God wants us to forgive. When we don't forgive, it hurts us inside. It eats away at us. And David just seems so good at forgiving. And I pray that we can all be as forgiving as David was. Then we see that when David returned, he was also generous. And he was offering to take care of people, like the old man who had offered him food and taking care of him. And when the old man declined but said, "Here is my son," David took his son. So we see David is generous. And so it's very good to be generous because everything we have comes from God. And David knew that he was only king because of God. And he was generous with that. So I pray that we are all just as generous as David when it comes time for us to be so. Then we see that Satan tempted David, and he loves to accuse and he loves to tempt us. Joab has been sent into David's life for a lot of good advice. And actually, I forgot to mention that at the very beginning, where he was still mourning for Absalom. And Joab has been a voice of wisdom for him throughout. And so there is a time to mourn, but there was a time to be responsible. He was the king, and Joab was right. He couldn't just go around being sad for his son and discouraging his army, because his army were the people who were fighting on his behalf. And Joab was absolutely right there to tell him, "You need to snap out of this. You've had your time to mourn and you need to move on." Just like when he had the son who belonged to Bathsheba, and when the son died, then he did not stay mourning because he was hoping that God would save the son. And then he said, "I cannot bring him back alive. So there's no reason for me to stop eating and to be sad." So he was not practicing this at this time. Now he was just going on and on about it. And he was the king, so he had a greater responsibility to think of the kingdom and the other people involved, not just for himself. So David is good to take the advice. And when God sends us people who give us good advice, then it's good when we follow that good advice. It's wonderful that God sends people into our lives to help us with things like that, don't you think? We don't know where that advice will come from at times. Maybe you have a trusted friend who gives you good advice. Maybe it's just to listen to your parents because they give good advice. But uh, God sends people into our lives to help snap us out of things and to help us take the right direction. So going back to the tempting that Satan did, Joab once again advised David and said, "What you're going to do is wrong. This is not okay." So we might be a little bit confused as to why it was wrong to count the people who could possibly fight in the army. And what David was doing was he was taking comfort in his own numbers. He was trying to see, how many people do I have to fight for me? And it might seem like something innocent, but what he was not doing was he was not trusting in God. He was trusting in the people to be able to defend and to fight. When who had gone before him in all of these other fights? It was God. So that was a sign of not trusting in God, but instead trusting in himself. And so that is why when he had this number, as soon as he got this number, he realized this was not right. I should not have done this. But he was the king. So there is greater responsibility for him. For those who have been entrusted with much, much is expected of them, Jesus tells us. And for those who have been given little, little is expected of them. But King David should have known better. He had wise people advising him that this was wrong, and he still gave in to the temptation. And as soon as he did, he regretted it, but it was too late. He had already done it. So, as a consequence, God offered him one of three options. Each one of those options would kill people and reduce the number of people that he would have so that he would no longer be able to take comfort in that. Do you remember when Gideon had all of those men that he had gathered to fight in the battle? If you've been around a little while, you may remember Gideon. And he had a lot of men, and God said, no, you have too many men. So he said, anybody who is afraid, you can go. And a lot of men left. And God said, out of the 300 men that were still, out of the many people that were still left, he said, you still have too many. So he took Gideon down to the water and told him to send off part of the people who drank water a certain way, because he didn't want Gideon to say, it was me and all my men who won this battle. It helps us to be arrogant when we have so much that we can then trust in our own abilities. And so this is what David was doing here, was he was then trusting in the strength of his army instead of trusting in God's strength to do with even just a very few men. Do you remember when, I'm trying to think who it was, but there were two men. I thought maybe it was David and somebody else who said that they would, I think actually it was Jonathan. It was Jonathan, Saul's son, who went with his armor bearer. And they were off to fight, and they snuck off, and they were along the mountaintop. And they said, if God is, I think it was Jonathan. I could be wrong on that one. Maybe it was David. I'm having trouble remembering the name on that one. And he said, God it was for, can be for many, and he can be for few. And if God is for us, then he will let us know. And so he said, if they say this, then we will go down and fight. And if they say this, then we will not go fight. And that will be God's sign that we are not going to win. But God gave them the sign to go ahead, and they won. And so it doesn't matter how few or how many people there are. God actually prefers to do it with fewer people, so that way we are not tempted to say, see what I did, see what we could accomplish on our own. So that's where the sin was, and that's why God's punishment was to eliminate the numbers of people, was so that David could not take comfort. 70,000 people was a lot out of the people that were numbered. So our daily application there is to not put our hope in our own selves, but to instead trust in the Lord. And we know the verse for that. I'm having trouble remembering exactly how it goes. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways trust in the Lord. There we go. And that's what he was not doing. He was not trusting in the Lord there. So that is definitely our big application, in addition to forgiveness and generosity, when we have opportunity to forgive and opportunity to be generous. So I hope that you are encouraged to see that God doesn't need a lot of people, and he doesn't like it when we don't trust that. And sometimes we could have our own overconfidence in what we have, and so God may go through and remove some of it if we are getting a little bit arrogant. And yeah, it's possible. So thank you for joining me today. And I'm so glad that you are listening or watching wherever you are. And if you feel that God has lit your light today, please click that light button. And hit that follow or subscribe if you have not done so already on whichever channel you are listening or watching. And I will hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their Friday today. And I will be here for everybody again tomorrow.